All right, I think we're at 6:31, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to the Transform Lexington Market community meeting, where we'll be talking about brand and identity for Lexington Market. This is the fifth community meeting out of a series. My name is Pickett Slater Harrington. I serve as the community engagement lead for Seawall, which is the community developer selected by the city of Baltimore to facilitate the transformation of Lexington Market. I'm so happy to be here tonight with a wonderful group of panelists. But before I introduce them, I want to go ahead and lay down a couple of housekeeping agreements for tonight. I wanted to share that we'll be joined by participants both on Zoom tonight as well as Facebook Live. So hello to everyone who's joining by Zoom and on Facebook. I want to let folks know that we want this to be interactive. So if you're on Zoom, please feel free to use the chat box. I see a couple of folks, Rob and Cornetta, have both found the chat box and started to put information there. Feel free to use that to ask any questions that you have tonight. If you're on Facebook Live, please use the comment section. And I have two colleagues who are behind the scenes, Peter and Katie, who will be monitoring both the chat box as well as the comment box on Facebook Live to share your comments and share your questions that we have tonight. Also want to really thank all of our partners who make this possible, and especially the community who is helping create a vision for Lexington Market. I want to start out by giving a little bit of background on the project for Transform Lexington Market. Lexington Market is the longest continuously operating market in the country, 200 plus years. It's a Baltimore icon. It's been around for 9 generations. It's hard to go down the street and bump into a Baltimorean and they not have a story about Lexington Market. We are really fortunate in that we have a once in a generation opportunity to contribute to the story of Lexington Market with its renovation. I shared earlier, the city of Baltimore is revitalizing Lexington Market and has selected Seawall to help facilitate that transformation. As part of that process, Seawall has been engaging with the community to not only get their feedback on their vision for Lexington Market, but also to put community at the center of the decision-making process. This is our fifth community meeting. Other community meetings have focused on vendor recruitment and selection, as well as capturing the history and culture of Lexington Market. Tonight, we'll be talking about brand identity for Lexington Market. We'll share a little bit tonight. If you go to the next slide, I want to go over the agenda for tonight. So we'll give you an overview of what brand identity means. What are the elements of brand identity? What goes into creating a very strong brand identity? And then we'll also talk about how do we listen to community to get your input so that can inform the brand identity that's created from Lexington Market. And then finally, we'll actually show you some examples based on the feedback that we've been hearing from community already about the direction we should be heading in. And then finally, we want to take your questions and comments related to where the brand and identity of Lexington Market needs to go and where it needs to be. If you can move to the next slide. I shared before that Lexington Market belongs to the community of Baltimore, and it's the right and responsibility of the community to develop a vision for Lexington Market. As such, Seawall has been engaging with community in lots of different areas, from vendor selection and recruitment to history and culture, and tonight, brand and identity. I want to share that we've also put up a survey that's on transformlexington.com. We've been collecting information from hundreds of folks here in Baltimore. I do want to reference that site. So if I can have either Katie or Peter drop transformlexington.com into the chat box, you can click on that link. It tells you everything that you need to see about the project. Just wanted to let folks know the Transform Lexington Market is scheduled to open early 2022. So we have this entire year of 2021 to get prepared and get ready for that. and you can see a live update of what the building looks like and find out about all the other elements of the project and how you can get involved and share your voice at transformlexington.com. At this time, I want to introduce two of our partner panelists who are going to be here tonight. So the first is BCT Design Group. So BCT Design Group is represented by Brennan Murray. So Brennan, wave so folks can see you there. So welcome, Brennan. And BCT is a local architectural firm and design group who's done a lot of deep work here in Baltimore. We also have with us joining the panelists two members from Ashton. So Alexi and Jeremy, if we can both wave. So Ashton is a great design firm here in Baltimore. They've done a number of different Baltimore projects, including Camden Yards, and they actually participated in a very rigorous selection process to be the designer for Lexington Market. And we're so excited to have them with us, and they're so eager to listen and to learn from community as they help to design the brand and identity for Lexington Market. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Alexi Economou, who is the principal and creative director at Ashton. Lexi, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and Ashton Design, and then you can kind of dive into the information you want to share with us tonight.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Pickett. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Alexi Economou from Ashton Design. And we're a local design studio, and we specialize in branding and placemaking, and have been doing it in Baltimore for just over 35 years. So yeah, you may recognize some of our projects, as Pickett mentioned, just down the street from Lexington Market, Camden Yards, as well as Sagamore Pendry Hotel, Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore Museum of Industry, Mount Vernon Marketplace, and many other Baltimore institutions. So naturally, we're extremely excited and proud to be a part of this team and working on Lexington Market. So tonight, you're going to meet just a few of the team members that from our organizations that have been working on this, but there's many other people involved that we wish could be here as well. So as we start into this, what we want to ask ourselves, what is brand identity, and letting everyone know and understand what it is as we move forward with this process. So a brand identity is more than just a logo. It's the entirety of an organization's expression of itself into the world. So think about the characteristics that make someone the person they are, what makes them unique, their personality, as well as how they present themselves to the world. So this includes a visual language that is used as somewhat of a kit of parts to help tell the brand story. And so for Lexington Market, the brand identity contains several key elements. So yeah, a logo, of course, is the easiest and most prominent thing to associate with a brand identity. But we'll explain that it's not nearly the only thing. So look and feel, which is the distinct look that differentiates a brand from another brand and how it makes a viewer feel when they interacted with it. Typography, or the characteristics of the letter forms and how they're composed. The color palette, illustration, specific artistic style, or iconography, which we'll talk about more later. And of course, style and subject matter of photographs. Messaging and tone, again, back to personality. How does this brand speak to its audience or friends? What kind of words does it use? Is it funny, serious, or purely informative? And brand extensions are all these marketing and advertising pieces that carry this brand identity, such as the website, advertisements, social media, etc. And think about all the brands that you all interact with and follow every day, especially in this day and age. But for Lexington Market, there's many components, but to date, hasn't really been clearly defined as far as having a clear identity. So the other part of it is placemaking. So for Lexington Market being such a prominent destination, the physical space itself and everything inside and outside of it help define the brand identity. So similar to the logo, the building architecture prominently emanates the brand identity, or in our case, one of the biggest pieces of the brand identity is the building architecture, and we'll talk more about that in this presentation. We also have signage and wayfinding, or how you navigate in and around the space. Environmental graphics, which is history and culture and storytelling that happens within a space through the use of 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional graphics. More on that as well. And public programming, which is how the market interacts with the community and through actions and events that entertain as well as promote health and well-being. And again, together, all this creates the placemaking aspect. So together, all of this includes, of course, all of this, including the amazing vendors that make up the market itself. This all contributes to the market's brand identity. And to note, the vendors themselves in the market will all have their own unique identity, which will reflect who they are. So how do we develop an informed identity for Lexington Market? We, through this process, we've been informed by many things, and we'll walk through these components. So, ongoing community engagement, extensive research and historical context, guiding principles for Lexington Market, market analysis of the surrounding areas and neighborhood, and the goals that we have established for branding and placemaking. And now Brennan is going to kind of walk through some of these particular components.
Good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. As Pickett said, I'm with BCT Design Group. I head up our studio for branding and graphics. And my colleagues and I at BCT are very honored and humbled to be able to work on this project. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the community engagement efforts that have gone on before. As Pickett said, this is our 5th outreach, our 5th meeting. We've also had a call for the vendors, which just wrapped up a few months back, and again, we're getting ready to go up into the 2nd round for the open round for a new vendor call there as well. And then a few weeks back, we had the history component done by the Peel Center. They had an outreach with the community as well. So there have been many ways that you can be in contact with what's going on, and you can interact with the process as we move forward and continue to develop the brand and also the market itself. Next slide. So when we reached out, especially through the Transform Lexington survey, we got data back from you all about where you live, what the median age of the market was, what the racial and ethnic makeup of the market was, as well as gender and also other data points. And we take this information and we make sure that we are, one, addressing major groups, or the majority of those, but also making sure that we address the minorities based on the different data points. So we've gotten responses from over 300 some people, and we continue to get those responses. You'll also receive, and Pickett will talk about this later, but you'll also receive another opportunity to leave some more information on what you see here tonight. So there's always an opportunity to speak your mind in regards to what's going on at Lexington Market. Next slide. And here we're looking at just another way that sometimes how we visualize that data that we receive from you all. So this is an amalgamation of multiple different questions things that you've loved over the years about Lexington Market. You'll know, I'm just going to point out a few. For example, of course, market being the largest. I mean, when we talk about Lexington Market, we say the word. However, food and vendors being the next largest words. And as Alexi said before, the vendors and the food that they offer is what makes the market what it is, whether they be prepared foods or fresh foods. Which you'll see is also one of the other larger words, fresh food. We also understand that this market is a grocer in this community and throughout the food deserts of Baltimore. We want to make sure that we maintain that component throughout the market and also throughout the messaging that's still available, will be available in the new Transform Market. And then the last one that I just want to point out too is the word great. You can see it there, kind of slanted diagonally. And I just point that out to say that the news and narrative of Lexington Market is usually not as positive as we'd like it to be, but those that interact with the market, whether they work there, whether they visit there, whether they're a patron or a tourist, most of the time the interaction is great. And that's something that we want to, again, pull into the messaging and the personality and the overall brand identity. That feeling that people can say that Lexington Market is great. So there, and then there's a slew of other words there, of course, that everyone spoke to as well. Next slide. So we're going to pull out a few things out of your responses, just so you could see what your other patrons or your other neighbors or colleagues or whatever have you said about the market. So this question being, how can we make Lexington Market better? And overwhelmingly, the response was usually in around one, the legacy of the market, maintaining its history, but also maintaining the authenticity of the market. Keep what makes Lexington Market, keep what makes this place a unique place in Baltimore, a unique place in Seton Hill, a unique place in the downtown district, a unique place in Maryland, a unique place in the United States. So don't lose what this market has brought to the table for the past 200 years. And then, of course, as well, make sure that it represents Baltimore in the best possible light. All of Baltimore. Next slide. And then a few other quotes, and I'm not going to read them all fully, but the first one I want to bring your attention to, which we thought was a very interesting fact, and it made us look at the market in a slightly different way as well. And I'll read a little bit of that. I love how every Baltimorean, no matter what generation they come from, has a story about their trips to Lexington Market, either as a child or an adult. Every person who has ever been to Lexington Market, whether you've been one time or whether you go every weekend or every week or whatever have you, they have their association with the market. So there are some people who associate with the market from the 50s, and there are some people who associate with the market from the 70s, and there are some people who associate with the market from the 90s, and there are people who associate with it today. So everyone has a lens that they view Lexington Market through, but all of those different lenses make up the entire, encompass the entirety of what Lexington Market is and what it actually means to this city. Another one that I'll just quickly read, diversity and inclusivity. Lexington Market is not just a place, it's a treasure for people and the communities that it serves. We understand, and we heard very strongly throughout the responses, that Lexington Market has become somewhat of a community hub over the years, especially in the last, let's say, 40 years. So we understand that it must be a component moving forward, and that also must translate into the messaging and even programming as well. Next slide. So in speaking of programming, this question was, what other community programming, outreach activities, and events do you think are important to have as a part of Lexington Market? Well, we got a slew of responses there, of course. Everything from activities for children and kids, training, job training, to pop-up kitchens, to nutritionists, to all different kinds of things. So, and Seawall, our community developers, community builders are working through those things. And while this work does not reside within the people who are here discussing the brand and identity, this doesn't reside in our scope of work. However, what we do will communicate these programs and these opportunities to interact with the market beyond once the brand and once the market is built. I mean, this is how community engagement continues beyond these meetings that we have every few months. So Seawall is working through those, and we'll be releasing more information about that in the future. Next slide. So when we talk about the historical context, as Pickett and Alexi both mentioned, Lexington Market is over 200 years old. It is the longest running public market in the United States, starting in the early 1800s. And then you're looking, of course, on the right at the new architectural component, the new market as well. And there's a lot of history to be had in between. You can go to the next slide. As I said, everything from the early 1800s until now. And if you notice on the top middle photo, that photo actually features, that's the mid 1800s, when there were actually three separate market sheds along Lexington Street. And then on the lower left, you see the new arcade opening in the 80s. So Lexington Market has transformed many times, and we've been calling this whole endeavor Transform Lexington Market, but Lexington Market has transformed many times. Everything from expansions to outdoor street stalls, to losing the outdoor street stalls, to fires, to being rebuilt after fires. So as we walk through this, we want you to just be aware and note that Lexington Market has evolved over many years, and may even continue to evolve in the future. But this is just the next step in that evolution. So we're not trying to lose anything. We're actually bringing along all the evolutions that have happened before. You can go to the next slide. So after we got everyone's responses and sift through all that data and read over and contemplated, we start to come up with guiding principles, which act as kind of like a Bible for us. To every decision we make moving forward, we have to make sure that the decision we've made matches up with the principles that we've established. So the first of those being community. Lexington Market is an inclusive and an affordable and communal space where individuals from all backgrounds can gather and coexist harmoniously. This includes everyone, again, from the vendors to those who live nearby the market, those who live in Baltimore City, those who live in Baltimore County, Maryland. All those people need to be able to, one, know that they're welcome, and also coexist harmoniously. You can go to the next slide. The second being heritage. Again, as I said before, overwhelmingly we heard about don't lose the legacy, or don't forget the history component, or make sure you research this, or make sure you know about this. So the heritage is maybe one of the biggest components that the market has to offer. Lexington Market is a Baltimore institution, and it served our community for more than 9 generations. It served our community for, I mean, just think about it, 9 generations. I mean, if your family's been in Baltimore for a good long time, it served almost every person in your family at one point or another, or at least they knew about it if they hadn't gone. And just some of the photos on the side, the expansion in the 60s with the East Market. The photo in the middle is a tour with Jesse Jackson on one of his Rainbow Coalition tours throughout the United States. And then on the lower left, of course, early 1800s photo as well, with that iconic market shed roof. You go to the next slide. The third being sincerity. Everyone at Lexington Market knows and respects the hustle. And I love that idea of the hustle, because not only are the vendors hustling and everybody is making their living and providing a service to the community, but those that visit the market also have a hustle. Those that are outside of the market, the activity that goes on outside the market is a hustle. So there is a level of sincerity that we want to bring to the project, because the people that are involved in it, whether they be vendors or community members, are sincere about what they're doing. So we want to be just as sincere as we move forward with the brand development. Next slide. And then the last and the most enjoyable principle maybe is nourishment. Food ties people together. Lexington Market will be filled with an abundance of fresh food and unique culinary profiles, ensuring that there's something for everyone's appetite and at every price range. We heard overwhelmingly that diversity is desired at the market, a diversity of offerings, a diversity of food types, a diversity even within the fresh food, a diversity of fresh food types. And then also that we need to keep Lexington Market affordable. This is completely understood by Seawall, and as well as by the design group working on the brand development, that the messaging needs to match that same affordable price range. So we don't want to price anyone out. We don't want to perception anyone out of the market. So these things are very important. And of course, everyone wants to, good food is always good. So that had to be a guiding principle as well. Next slide. So as we wrap up with the guiding principles, we move into the market analysis. And I'll turn it back over to Alexi to start to talk about some of these things.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. So the market analysis includes an understanding of the surrounding landscape around Lexington Market, including other markets, grocery stores, and food options, as well as the opportunity for us to leverage the immediate neighborhood and all of the great cultural points of interest, such as the Bromo Seltzer District and Market Center, the Hippodrome Theater, Everyman Theater, Camden Yards, and University of Maryland. So also within market analysis is positioning, or how Lexington Market is positioned in people's minds relative to other food options or Baltimore area destinations, because Lexington Market is a public market and a community space. Also, we need to understand, who our target market is. Who are the people that come to the market, and who do we want to come to the market that doesn't come now? So area residents, existing and new, both existing and new vendors, new patrons within the city and surrounding region, Baltimore residents that love their city and those Baltimore foodies, history aficionados, and tourists. So why come to the market? To explore a wide range of multicultural and diverse culinary options, and of course at varying price points. Experience the true essence of Baltimore, and to step into a piece of American history, a living American history. So finally, all of this culminates into one kind of concise positioning statement that we can always refer back to as a team as we move forward. So Lexington Market has the widest range of Baltimore food and food and culture in one place, granting local Baltimoreans and tourists the opportunity to experience the true Baltimore. And finally, the final component that has informed our team for the brand identity includes the goals that has established for branding and placemaking. And so those are to celebrate the market's history and legacy, maintain an open dialogue with local residents and Baltimore community, give support to the market's vendors, and help the market operate as a successful business for years to come. It's obviously we have to keep this going as a business every day, and create a brand identity and space that is inclusive and welcoming to all by establishing local following, which is very important, most important thing. And then of course, compelling tourists to come visit as well. So,
all right.
Yeah, Pickett.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Alexi and Brendan, for that. Alexi for really being thoughtful about sharing what a brand identity is, and also kind of thinking through how that translates to what we're trying to do. And Brandon, thank you so much for showing leadership on this and just being a part of the Baltimore community and making sure that's represented and all that information and feedback that we're getting from residents, that it's incorporated into the decision making. I want to also remind folks to please drop questions you have for the panelists or about the project in the chat box or the comment section. I definitely see Rob and Quinetta definitely dropped in some questions there, and we're definitely going to get to those other folks have as well. But before we answer those questions, I do want to have Jeremy Hoffman from Ashton Group, who serves as the Senior Director and Designer. Both Alexi and Brandon laid out the context that we're working in, and Jeremy has some first starts on what this could possibly look like. So it's some ideas, and it's definitely going to take a lot of input from community. But Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you at this time to share.
Great, thanks, Pickett. Yeah, so tonight we really wanted to share with you some of the process and some of our initial thoughts on what the Lexington Market visual identity and logo it could start to look like. And as Alexi and Brennan both mentioned, the historical context and the research has been a really important part of our design process. So in this little graphic here, kind of outlines some of the visual history that we've discovered. By the 1890s, we've got those kind of classic shed structures that you see in a lot of the vintage photographs. It's not until 1913 that we actually see a sign on top of those sheds, an illuminated sign. And then really over the course of the next 80 years, it's a potpourri of various signage elements, typographic iterations and treatments, you know, as the market changed. And it's not until the year 2000 that we really see the first moment, in this case, a sort of a large signage element that's added to the arcade, something that really starts to resemble a logo. In 2015, another market or mark was introduced, but to date, it hasn't really, you know, been publicized all that much. It's kind of been living in the shadows of the market the past few years. But it's what's interesting about all of this is that for 2 centuries, Lexington Market didn't really have a formal logo or a brand. You know, it's one of those things, I think, you know, for 2 centuries, everyone knew what the market was. I mean, they visited there, they shopped there. The market was really just a repository for hundreds of other businesses. It didn't really need a formal identity. We can go to the next slide, Alexi. You know, the architects have been looking back to those shed structures from the 1800s for great inspiration in the new market building. And that really seems like the proper place for us to sort of start our discovery phase as well. Most likely in the 19th century, sort of, you know, these kind of shed roof structures were commonplace in the city. But today, a sort of a 15-degree angled roof like this is going to be a really unique architectural feature in downtown Baltimore. So part of our process or one of the things we're charged with is to figure out how the words Lexington Market are going to live on this structure. But another thing that really interests us is how the structure itself can begin to influence the potential identity and logo for Lexington Market. Next slide. So we've been doing a lot of research, not necessarily Lexington Market specific, but research into letter forms and typography. Baltimore has a really rich history of painted signs. So we found dozens and dozens of photographs. We've been researching lettering manuals and sign painting manuals from the turn of the century. But one thing that we've been studying very carefully and considering is actually that arcade sign that was installed in the early 2000s. You know, it's been there for the past 20 years, and for many people, that sign represents Lexington Market. That's the Lexington Market that they know. And it's not necessarily the typography or the colors, but it's really the message. Baltimore has this kind of, you know, go big or go home mentality. You know, we are the greatest city in America, and it's really important that we somehow capture this composition, you know, in this message as we move forward with creating a new identity. It just seems like part of our responsibility is to really kind of honor this element that's been there for the past 2 decades. Next slide. As part of the identity process, we're going to be looking at colors, and the most obvious place to look is with food. You know, there's some classic culinary delights that the market offers, some things that are unique to Maryland and to Baltimore, and of course to the market. So it's kind of an obvious choice, and I think could create a really unique color palette. But this is just one of many directions that we could go in. There's tons of other places to be inspired for color. Next slide, Alexi. And one of those is considering the fact that Lexington Market is located in one of the busiest transit hubs in all of Baltimore City. On any given weekday, 25,000 people are using public transportation within a 2-block radius of Lexington Market. And one of those locations is actually the metro stop just across the street off of Utah. And in that metro station is an amazing source of color inspiration. There's a mosaic that was installed in the early 1980s by Baltimore artist and MICA professor Pat Alexander. And that mosaic offers an unbelievable amount of color inspiration for us. I think from, you know, something bright and bold as shown here on the top right to something that has sort of a more muted and earth tone palette there on the bottom right. But it's something that we discovered early on in the process and remains a source of inspiration for us as we consider the colors that we're going to be using for the project. But admittedly, we're still in the sort of very beginning of the process. Next slide. So in conclusion, tonight we wanted to share with you some of the sort of very preliminary things that we're considering for the project. These are what I'd call sort of basic foundational components that we'll be using to sort of build a kind of a larger brand upon. On the left is a simple typographic lockup. It's based on that historic world famous signage that's been hanging on the arcade for the past 20 years, you know, that admits that Lexington Market is in fact world famous. On the right-hand side, we have a medallion-like logo that sort of reinforces that 15-degree angle of those 19th century shed roofs, as well as the brand new market building that's under construction. Next slide. And if you'll see the logo on the right, the medallion, we're utilizing a bull in the center of that mark. The bull's been an element that's been in the market's history from the very beginning. There was an octagonal bull medallion in that 1930 or 1913 sign. And the bull has actually had a sort of a prominent role as a decorative motif inside the market for the past 40 years as well. So for us, it's a strong icon in the market's history. And I'll turn it back to Brennan, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the other possible symbols and icons that the brand identity could use.
So when we're talking about icons or iconography, we're referencing simplified visual images and symbols that are used in a work of art or to represent different objects or themes. So whether it be a person, a place, a thing, a small mark that will represent important things or folklore that Lexington Market may hold. So to the right, you can see some examples of some things that we just came up with, but this is really, we want to take the opportunity to hear from the community as to what do they think are the important local landmarks or the important Baltimore-centric icons or market-centric icons, symbols, important people in the market's history, or even just folklore about the market. I'll share a little tidbit with you that we there's a story of a bull that got loose once at Lexington Market. So that's something that we're thinking about as in regards to like folklore. So as you can see on the right, we have the building itself, the market bull that Jeremy spoke to, Old Bay, of course, and crabs, waffles from Connie's Waffles or others, a muskrat from Fadley's, crab cakes from Fadley's, local landmarks around the market, the Bromo Seltzer Tower, or the Hippodrome, or Camden Yards, or even more Baltimore-centric Preakness as a Baltimore celebration. So we really want to hear from you all. What else do you think those marks could be or should be? And they'll be used in places such as within the messaging and social media, as well as ephemera, hats, bags, or even placemaking items, as Alexi spoke to earlier about. Remember on that chart, you had the graphic identity of Lexington Market, but then you also have the placemaking identity. So these may appear as icons or signs within the market. So we really like to hear from you in regards to what icons do you think are important to this project. You can go to the next slide. Again, thinking about that chart that Alexi showed in the beginning, the market voice, the messaging of the market. So how will the market communicate events? How will the market communicate the vendors? How will the market communicate to the community at large? So how will the market speak? How will it sound? And we thought that the best way for the market to sound is by the people who are actually either working there or visit there. So if you were able to catch the Peel Center's community engagement event a few weeks back, they've been collecting stories and quotes, and we've had stories and quotes from the initial Transform Lexington survey that we want to use your words to create that brand voice and that brand message. So that it can only be unmistakably Lexington Market because it's from the people who make Lexington Market what it is. You can go to the next slide. And as I mentioned before, the Peel Center, Lexington Market Public History Initiative seeks to collect and archive and tell the stories of Lexington Market. The Peel Center has set up an app called the Be Here Stories app. You can see that on the lower hand right, that you can get that on the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. And you can actually leave your story about Lexington Market in that app, and it will be used in multiple ways. Like I said before, it will be used in the messaging for the market. It may be used in the historical component, the history component of the market. So this is, if you ever wanted to say whatever you wanted to say about Lexington Market, this is your opportunity to share a story, whether it be for yourself or your family members, to kind of put that down in the archive. I also want to highlight our core partners, again, the Peel Center for Baltimore History and Architecture, Baltimore Heritage Group, the Baltimore Public Markets Corporation, the corporation that is over all Baltimore public markets, Lexington Market Inc., that solely runs Lexington Market, the Market Center Community Development Corporation, and Seawall, our community builders and community developers. So yes, we just wanted to highlight those folks because they are the ones that are making this possible. Go to the next slide. In thinking about some of the placemaking, I saw a question earlier about are any of the artifacts going to be saved, or is anything going to be reused in the new market? And yes, it certainly is. You can see some of the ideas on the right. Of course, we're finding a place for the stained glass cow and bull that will be reused in the market. It will live on. All the signs that were on the arcade, the world famous Lexington Market signs, those have been saved and salvaged and are being evaluated for, can they be reused? Can they be repaired? Most of them were out of working order. So we're looking into those. And there may be opportunities where some of these things, we may not use the original just because of the condition it may be in, but we will most certainly be inspired by these items to bring them back into the new market. So everything from the stained glass, the market bell, some of the neon signage that existed in the arcade, marking the Utah Street and the Paca Street entrance, the Metro sign. Some of those will be reused in this new market, and definitely we want to bring all the good stuff from the old arcade building into the new market. So there's definitely an opportunity to reuse. I also want to put out there, if there are other artifacts or historical mementos or stories that to be told that you all know of that we're just not aware of, we want to hear about those. We want to know about those. We've already had some people tune in, or reach out and share that, like, for example, their father owned a stall in Lexington Market and they have the original signs from the stalls. And so whether you want to permanently donate it to Lexington Market Incorporated, or you want to share it and photograph it, or just share it with us as inspiration, we want to hear and see those things. So certainly, please reach out if you have anything to share. Next slide. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Pickett to head up our Q&A component.
Thanks a lot, Brandon. Really appreciate that. When you mentioned the icons, you got people going. They mentioned King Syrup as one, but then they say you should take all the icons and put them in the shape of a crab and make it into into that shape. So lots of great ideas. Jeremy, thank you so much for your thoughtfulness and taking all this information and trying to make it real and just incorporating those elements into the visual design. It's been really great. Now for the most important part of the meeting is kind of getting to the questions that folks have. And we have a lot of questions. So I was looking at the chat box. I know we got folks looking at the comment section. So lots of great questions here. I'm going to ask my colleague, Katie, to come in and help us with how we do the questions. And if you can kind of share some of that, and then we'll go through and answer some of those. So Katie, do you want to call it out for us, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, let's just jump in. We can kind of I think there's been some questions coming into the panelists only, so folks haven't been able to see them. I think, a good question that came in kind of around signage and accessibility was if restrooms will cater to consumers with disabilities. So Brennan or Peter, do you guys want to jump in real quick to address that one?
Sure. So the restrooms will be on the lower levels. They will be fully accessible. Both the women's and men's have 2 accessible stalls, as well as there will be an elevator so that those who need it can traverse the 2 floors. So we think we have that covered, and we have to have it covered. So yeah, I think that handles that.
And I'll also add to that, Brandon, I think the existing building had a sloped floor, which isn't always great. Maybe going down it's a little easier, but like going up when it comes to accessibility, so that issue will be, alleviated as well. So this is an inclusive place for everybody, and everybody's welcome. All right, Katie, what other questions do you have?
Well, we have a follow-up question to that one about gender-neutral signage for the bathrooms. And yes, I can answer that one easily. Yes, that is definitely going to be a part of the signage in the types of bathrooms that are available. So,
great.
Maybe we can jump to a question that came in earlier about how will the new market encourage, the abbreviation was MWB, which I think we're assuming is kind of minority women-owned businesses and entrepreneurs. And I'll just say to everyone on the call, we're getting questions that are about kind of the market and the redevelopment in general. If there's questions really focused around the branding and identity, we'd love to kind of stick to those tonight. But Pickett, maybe you want to quickly jump in on that one.
Yes, I'd love to share about this. So I'll share it in the context of the vendor recruitment and selection process. And so we just finished the first round of vendor recruitment and selection. The second round starts later this month. And we have 2 rounds as an equity issue to make sure everybody hears about it and everybody has a chance to apply. I would say in the first round, we had 60% Black-owned businesses apply out of the applications. 60% were women-owned, and 60% were city resident-owned. And we selected about half the number of vendors in this first round, which is about 20-odd vendors. And those numbers stayed pretty close to what we got when it came out with the application. So it's a little bit different, but there's definitely diversity there when it comes to Black-owned, women-owned, and other minority-owned businesses in Lexington Market. The second round will be launching in mid-January, so be on the lookout for that information. It'll be in the press. It'll be on the transformlexington.com website, and we're definitely going to be looking for specific things that we didn't get in round one for round two when it comes to ownership, but also types of food that's there in the market as well. And there's all types of opportunities, not only if you want a permanent stall, but also if you just want a kiosk and you want to be part of the Lexington Market. There's a way for community members, no matter where they are in their business development, to be a part of Lexington Market. So Katie, next question.
So we had actually, Sally brought up a great point. She asked if there will be another way to answer these questions if people want to provide longer responses. And that's a great question. And yes, we will have a follow-up survey that will come to everyone. If you registered for this meeting, we have your email. We'll send a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to this presentation and a follow-up survey where if you want to provide more in-depth answers to these questions, you will absolutely have that opportunity. So great question. And I also wanted to go to a question about the history projects that came from Rob. He asked if there was anyone else working on it besides the Peel team. And I will put a link in the chat to a page more about that initiative. But the short answer is that there is both a public historian who's really working on exploration and documentation and interpretation of the 200 plus year history of Lexington Market. And the Peel team is really working on that living history, collecting stories from folks throughout Baltimore City and Maryland about the market. So I'll share a link to everyone on the call with that info, but great question.
Awesome. What other questions do you have, Katie? We have about six more minutes. I do want to save a minute or so at the end to ask my panelists to kind of give any last thoughts, but we have about five or six more minutes for questions.
We have a good question in here about if COVID will be a part of like some updated requirements or new ways of living from COVID will be a part of design considerations. Does anyone want to speak to that? I know that that's at the forefront of everyone's mind.
Sure. I'll start that off, and then I'll maybe toss it to Brandon. He may be able to speak a little bit more as the designer of the physical space too. So with COVID, we've been talking and working with BCT Design Group on a couple of things to kind of think about when it comes to COVID and the new reality of the world that we're living in. First and foremost, we're thinking about the physical space and how the seating is arranged. And so when you look at some of the renderings, if you go to transformlexington.com, there's lots of smaller seating areas that's throughout the market instead of just one big, large seating area where everybody's congregated together. Seating is kind of spread out. There's also this wonderful outdoor plaza, which allows opportunity for folks to be outside. Another feature in the physical building is that there will be some walk-up windows where businesses will be facing outside to the plaza, where you can kind of walk up and you don't have to physically go in the building. The other thing that we're focused on COVID that isn't so much a physical building design, but it is making sure that all of the vendors in there have a system and a way of electronically ordering and getting food delivered, so you can support curbside service and food delivery as well. That's going to be a robust infrastructure there. Brandon, any other pieces to add? Folks were saying, like, will it be touchless water faucets and all that? Could you share a little bit more?
Yes, there will be touchless. I want to make sure we answered that question. There will be touchless water faucets and touchless air hand dryers as well. As Pickett's mentioned, you actually covered the things that I was going to cover: the walk-up windows and the seating arrangement. So yes, we are taking those into consideration as we move forward with the development of the market.
Katie, do you see any other questions or just comments in general that we have either from Facebook Live or on the chat box?
I am trying to keep up, but I think we covered.
There's a lot of information coming in.
Yeah,
I see it scrolling.
Most everyone's questions, and there's been great engagement from folks. So yeah, no, I think that's it.
Great. And so one of the things that just want to let folks know, this meeting is recorded. So we'll actually share this back out, and you'll have a link to this. So you'll be able to actually see it and hear it and share it with other folks. I also wanted to let you know we're going to be following up to everybody who registered for this meeting to send them an email, which will be a link so you can answer some of the questions that were posed here and to give feedback directly for brand and identity. And so watch out for that email. Once again, you can always visit transformlexington.com. It's always going to have the most updated information about the project, how you can get involved, and what's happening. We definitely encourage you to join us for future kind of town halls and community gatherings like this. We're going to be doing several more throughout 2021. And please follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And we just want to be sure that we are collecting the history and stories from everyday people about Lexington Market. So definitely connect with the Peel Center by visiting their website. Or if you don't want to go to the web, you can call in a story. There's a phone number where you can just dial 1-833-TELSTRY, tell story, and just leave your story there. Or you can use the app, the Be Here Stories app, to share your story. So it's part of the permanent record and history of Lexington Market. And if you have any artifacts, meaning documents, memorabilia, anything that you want to share with our public historian or think it might have historical relevance for Lexington Market, you can email us at hello@transformlexington.com or visit the Peel Center. We have a couple more minutes left. I want to go back to my panelists just to get final thoughts on anything that you want to share or anything you want to highlight or any comment that you want to make. We'll start with Brandon, then go to Jeremy, and we'll end with Alexi. So, Brandon, anything you want to add as a final comment?
Sure. I want to give a little shout out to Patricia Alexander, who just joined or has joined the meeting here. I just want to let you know you and also the community, that we've been inspired by that mural and other components outside of the color inspirations as well. For example, in the bathrooms, we will be using a mosaic inspired by your art installation at the metro station. So that, and I want to speak to that just so that it's an example of how we're really trying to be aware of and pull solely from the roots of this market. We're not trying to look at other markets. We're not trying to look at things outside of Baltimore to develop the brand or even the architectural style of this market. So everything that we're doing is taking into consideration the surrounding community and the surrounding ethos of the market as well.
And Brandon, I'll just add to Pat and all the artists that are out there, we're actually going to be doing probably a community meeting down the line just to talk about art. There's a whole thing with art integration with Lexington Market. It's so wonderful and so exciting. That's going to be a big piece there as well. Jeremy, any last thoughts?
Yeah, just want to thank everyone for joining and remind them that what you saw tonight is really just the very beginning. We imagine this brand to sort of grow into something that is much more complex and really sort of highlights the weirdness and quirkiness of Lexington Market, the reason why we all love it. So don't be alarmed that, if you're disappointed in what you saw tonight, doesn't feel like it sort of fully captures the spirit. As I said, it's really just the start, and we see this growing into something really great and exciting.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. We look forward to working with you and seeing what you and your team come up with. Alexi, closing words.
Yeah, again, just, we're super excited to be working on this with the team, with the community. this is a Baltimore treasure, and we really want to make it feel like it's always meant to be here and a part of Baltimore and part of the fabric and community and culture. So yeah, we are really excited to hear what other people have to contribute and say and add to their stories, and we will look to try and incorporate as much as we can and build upon everything that we've learned and heard from people. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lexi. And Bruce said you got to make it weird and quirky too. Like Lexington Market is one of a kind. So Bruce is probably going to give you some weird and quirky ideas. But thank all of you. I want to thank my panelists and the partners here. I want to thank you, the community, most importantly, for joining us and sharing your vision for Lexington Market. Please continue to share your vision in all the ways that are listed there. And until we see you next time, we're going to say, see you later. Thanks a lot, everybody.